Practical Fish Keeping, March 2021. The baddest badis. Tiny, intense, staggeringly popular, just what is it about this pretty red fish that the Instagram community loves so? Words by Nathan Hill. The scarlet badis. Thrown under the spotlight the world over, and very much in fashion. The species has become, and I imagine shall long continue to be, the fish of choice for the aspiring fish influencer on social media. Not that this has done it any favours. Browsing the #ScarletBadis hashtag on Instagram alone brings up around 2,500 relevant images, and of these it is possible to look past the colour boosting, imperfection removing digital filters to see that the fish are occasionally thin, excessively fat, clamped, pale, or outright sulky. A tragedy for what is one of the prettiest freshwater fish that nature has to offer. What exactly has gone wrong here? I fear the scarlet badis, or Dario to give it its full scientific name, is a victim of its own elegance. Too beautiful a fish to resist, too tempting to try in the smallest setups. It is a tiny species, barely able to stretch itself beyond 2.5 centimeters fully grown, making it perfect for the nanotank, in theory at least. In the wild, naturally, Dario occurs in northeastern India, perhaps even encroaching into Bangladesh, but definitely within West Bengal, Bihar, and Assam. Here it lives a cryptic life, in paradox to its bright livery, spending its time in especially clear, clean streams that bristle with plant life. Grassy Vallisneria, bushy Limnophylla, dense clumps of Rotala and Hygrophila. The scarlet badis immerses itself in all, blissfully hidden away in these miniature underwater forests. These streams may not be particularly large and are usually shallow, all the better for sunlight to punch down and really boost the vibrant flora these fish crave, but essentially they're flowing. To live in a stream is to live a life of one long, continuous water change. And here we find the first problem. A nanotank is not in the state of a continuous, refreshing water change. In fact, as most aquarists will know, a nanotank is a nightmare of fast fluctuating chemistry and quickly accruing water quality issues. To keep a fish in a tank of 25 litres is asking a lot. Its quarters can soon become a toxic swamp, the meagre water volume unable to dilute down the ammonia that the fish excrete, plus the waste from decaying feces and uneaten food. Many a scarlet badis keeper will, to their credit, keep their fish in heavily planted setups. While rarely housed in anything resembling a biotope, they will be living in a considerable backdrop of foliage, but here again things aren't always rosy. To keep a successful aquascape, many aquarists will turn their tanks into a nutrient soup, dosing heavily with nitrogen and phosphorus-based plant foods. They'll apply carbon dioxide that plays havoc with pH levels. Carbon dioxide in water manifests as carbonic acid, increasing the acidity, and the plants themselves will alter the very chemistry of the water through photosynthesis and respiration. Carbon dioxide misuse can hammer a fish's kidneys, impair gill function, and it's a lot harder to keep levels of it stable in a nanosystem. I should know that I've run several myself, monitored the water religiously, and mortified myself at just how unstable things were from day to day, morning to evening, to the extent that I refused to add fish to such tanks altogether. None of this is especially conducive to the welfare of the livestock, and I suspect there are reasons that so few nanoscapers report spawning successes from their fish. I suspect that farming has also played its part on the fortunes of the scarlet badis. Perhaps I am being too crotchety, looking back on my early hobby years with the rose tint, but the earliest imports I saw were punchy and confident, possibly because they were broadly limited to wild catches, or small batches from invested home breeders who would trickle quality stock back to the shops. These were intense fish, often in small numbers with a relatively high price tag. Oh, and how mass production changed that. The fish I now see on sale are a world apart, often washed out or nervously clustered at the corners and surface of their tanks. Ideal homes. Yet amongst all of my despair, perhaps there is so much hope for the fish. Perhaps we could start a movement to reclaim the species. #Hope for the baddest. For a while, a planted nanoscape can indeed house a gorgeous Dario, and there are more healthy fish to be admired online than there are failures. I feel that the way forward would still be to house them in a tank of more generous proportions, in something more becoming of their Indian homeland. I will always fly the flag for small fish in big tanks. Aim for something 60 centimeters long or more, instead of a glass cube that you could span with a single hand. Next, decorate it thoroughly. The scarlet badis loves a cave, so give it plenty. While not geographically correct, savu pods or empty seed cases will provide a wonderful refuge, especially if soaked adequately beforehand to reduce any nuisance tannins. An abundance of acids is to be avoided, especially as these fish fare so well in neutral to alkaline water. Black water is a no. Leaf litter too, steering towards a few large leaves that act as domes for the fish to lurk under. Again, strip the acids out of them first, soaking and flushing the leaves until they no longer cause staining. For plants, I've already mentioned a few choices above. The design and layout of the tank is entirely yours, but I'd go with a 90s mentality of tank planting. Back and sides dense with growth, clear space in the middle. The middle is where the leaves and seed pods should be. So add plenty to make the scarlet badis confident enough to roam. As a bonus, leaves and seed pods are where the food lives. Dario belongs to the niche that is the micropredator. In the wild, tiny ostracods and copepods are the order of the day, along with the small list of mid-larvae and underwater insects. Leaf little will go a long way to generating such miniature fare, especially if this tank has been allowed to sit untouched for some time before the fish go in. Scarlet badis seem to be particularly metabolically efficient In part, that'll be because they don't swim much. They potter, the exact opposite of active tetras and boisterous danios. In fact, they find such levels of activity offensive and prefer not to be kept with fish that blunder about from end to end. The slow metabolism makes it possible to make them obese. Overly rich foods seem to be the culprit, and most in-the-know keepers have long stopped bothering with bloodworm to feed them. Cyclops, Daphnia, and freshly hatched Artemia are winners, and you should stock up, for it's unlikely the fish will accept dry offerings or flake or pellets. Their slowness and shy demeanour are more reasons not to keep them with faster active tank mates. In a flurry of tetra out and about at feeding time, the scarlet badis will retreat out of sight until things have calmed, returning only to graze at leftovers after all the good stuff has been gobbled up. For this reason, it's wisest to house them alone where possible, by which I mean in male and female pairs. And this means you can also try breeding them. Scarlet spawning. First source of female. This is easier said than done, as retailers tend to favour the brighter males. Next, condition them with lots of live foods. It would be worth timing this with spring and summer, when the local ponds are full of tiny cyclops and other inverts, though you'd also do well to set up a large tub of rainwater in your garden. Seed it with a bag or two of live daphnia from your local retailer, and harvest your own from there. You can limit the risk of parasites and predators getting into your food that way. Badis how? The name of the scarlet badis harkens back to a long redundant scientific alias. In 1822, on its first description, it was assigned Labris dario, and later Badis dario, because of its true similarity with Baddest badis, the true badis. It was only at the turn of the century that ichthyologists Kullander and Brits reassigned the fish as Dario, and that we find the fish with its present name. In a nutshell, the Badis part of the name is just a taxonomic hangover, and some that stuck in common parlance, in the same way that many tetras are commonly known as tetras, after formerly being described as Tetragonopterus, and mollies were once called mollies, and mollies are called mollies because they were once called Molinesia. Scarlet badis are huggers in the same way that many anabantids when spawning, the male usually enticing the female over, usually under a big leaf or a flat stone, where he embraces her in a horseshoe position. She lays her eggs, he fertilizes them, then he chases them off. Then he'll change his mind and invite her back for another round, which she may or may not accept. The male protects the territory, but not the young, and once hatched, he'll see his offspring as potential snacks. One might guess that such a small fish has a pretty small brain to match when it comes to such matters. The solution is to simply remove whatever the eggs are laid on and hatch them separately in a small rearing container somewhere else. Raising the fry is much less straightforward, and after the eggs are laid, you only have a few days to sort out a feeding plan before they hatch and the fry absorb their yolk sacs. At that point, they need the tiniest of morsels. Infusoria and rotifers are good options, and it may be a little while before they can take even the smallest of microworms. And after that, revel in the moment. Most folks who keep them haven't reached the breeding stage, so you can take some photos, assuming you have a good macro lens, post them up on social media, and bathe in the warm glow that comes with strangers validating your successes online. The Scarlet Badis. Scientific name, Dario. Pronunciation, Dario. Size, 2.5 centimeters. Origin, northeastern India. Habitat, heavily vegetated sand and gravel streams. Tank size, 45 by 30 by 30 centimeters. Water requirements, neutral to slightly alkaline water, 6.5 to 8 pH, hardness 1 to 16H. Temperature, 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. Temperament, nervous, shy and small fish that's hostile to other males of its own species. Feeding, tiny foods required, including plenty of live cyclops and freshly hatched artemia. May take micro pellets, but not always. Availability and cost. Sometimes pops up in stores nano racks with prices starting from about £4. We recommend other species. Dario hinges on is a rare species restricted to the lakes of Myanmar, and as its habitat is protected, you'll only find tank-bred specimens in the trade. Danio sb Myanmar, or the black tiger dario, is another rare find. This species prefers turbid water than the wild, but seems to thrive in clear tanks in captivity.